Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to go over some Infinity War, Thanos and Black Order prep in anticipation of the update for Infinity War, the MCU kind of movie lifetime nerd event. And I want to do it now rather than later because as of yesterday with the video and a few days ago when it was leaked, that teaser or that leak image did feature upgrades for the Black Order specifically, and now would be a good time to reassess their value and maybe point you in the right direction if you've got some additional Black Antimatter and Chaos North Stones building up. If you've got your sights on one of them or two of them that you want to choose and you don't know which ones to choose from, I wanted to break them down for you, give you my thoughts on which one might be best coming out of whatever upgrades are going to show up and potential uniforms later on down the road, and then just try to throw in some predictions about where their power level is going to be after whatever update is coming, and then of course after Infinity War. So when the Black Order were first introduced to the game, they didn't have any tier 2 passives, and this includes Thanos. We're not going to talk about Thanos today, but it does include Thanos. So the Dark Immortality passive for Corvis, the Blind Rage passive for Black Dwarf, and so on weren't originally there. They actually got a buff not that long ago where they added these tier 2 passives into their kit, and the tier 2 passives generally did three things. They offered regular tier 2 passive effects that we've come to know and kind of expect for characters, like a guaranteed dodge, buff to existing summons and stuff like that, but they also changed existing skills and added effects for those skills. So for example, Proxima, and I know a lot of you are going to gasp when you realize that she is one of the original characters that had penetration, especially with the penetration on immunity. But then it says here, adds shock effect to the skill Impact Blow. When you go here, it says deals 30% shock damage. That was just not there before. So even though the text here is blue, it's weird, but it also mentions it there. So it basically just doubles up the reference to the kind of buff that they got. It also had some changes to the 4-star passives for certain characters, but that was essentially the buffs that the characters were given. After the buffs, we saw predominantly Corvis Glaive come out on top as the best and kind of most flexible character overall, and of course on the opposite end, Black Dwarf has been the worst character out of the bunch, and then kind of Ebony Maw, Proxima, and Supergiant are somewhere in the middle. We don't know what to expect from their Infinity War upgrades, but I can tell you that while Black Dwarf might be one of the more weak characters, his kit is not. He's actually got a very strong kit, and my prediction is that he's probably poised for a pretty sizable buff depending on what he gets. The reason why I like Black Dwarf the best is because if he gets a uniform, and specifically if he gets a uniform, the uniform stands to buff him and Corvis and Ebony by extension the most. And the reason for that is what the uniform offers. Uniforms offer all defense and all attack, and that especially plays into Black Dwarf. Of course, the energy defense has always been low for him, but with his massive HP pool, his massive physical defense pool, the uniform's really going to drive up his numbers to respectable levels. And that already synergizes with the fact that he's got a physical immunity leadership. Of course, that gets countered by guys with penetration like Quicksilver, but for everyone else, he's very powerful in that sense, and a lot of people tend to forget that. He's got good skills. A lot of his skills have kind of native guard break or kind of flinching ability for the enemies. He's got bleed. He's got a lot of AoE, and I think the most important part about Black Dwarf's kit, which a lot of people forget, is his 4-star passive. The 35% increase to physical defense is nice, but he has automatic immunity to stun and guard break, so it makes him extremely flexible for his build. You don't have to give him guard break immunity on an obelisk, and he cannot be guard broken, not by Quicksilver, not by Scarlet Witch, by nobody. So it's not super armor. He legitimately has guard break immunity, a very rare trait for characters to have. Very few characters have it, and I think it's what makes him, depending on his upgrade for this update or the next one, a huge kind of dark horse. Now, he does have the worst tier 2 passive. The stats that you see there, the all attack, all speed, crit rate, only trigger when his HP drops below 60%, which is absolute trash. I hate these kinds of things because they're never good enough. If these numbers were doubled or tripled, like 90% all attack, then it would make sense that it only happens when his HP is below a certain amount. But let's be honest, in today's meta with the way the game is going, if you're below 60%, you're basically about to die to Jean Grey or Apocalypse or someone else. You know, there's very few characters that are going to chip you down to 60% suddenly and then not be able to finish you off the remaining 60%. So hopefully with the changes, his Blind Rage tier 2 does get buffed and changed. But I do think that, and I am expecting and hoping that Black Dwarf does kind of rise in his ranks and isn't forever known as the worst Black Order member. One character that I'm not really looking forward to seeing what the changes are and what the buffs are is for Supergiant, surprisingly. And while Supergiant does have a lot of things going well for her kit, like she has mind damage on most of her active skills and her damaging skills, which makes it easy to buff her up with a mind damage obelisk, and she has a summon that you can use to get away and kind of kite for you and aggro for you, and she does have 25% guaranteed dodge, and she's got the silence effect. The problem is that her main damaging skill, Giant Illusions, has really bad targeting. So unless the changes or the buffs to the character or her uniform, which she might not even get for Infinity War, because as far as the trailer art goes, she's not even in the movie, if this skill doesn't get changed, then it's gonna leave the character with her biggest weakness, which is that the targeting on the skill is really bad, and if the enemy that you're targeting with Giant Illusion isn't exactly in the middle to get hit by all of the giant kind of vortexes, these black vortexes that she summons, it's not going to do that much damage. Don't get me wrong, she does a lot of damage, and her damage is tremendous when you can land the skill properly. But the problem is just it's so difficult to get the enemy exactly in the middle, and they move around, or they, you know, get kind of hit while they're moving through a skill, and because it doesn't bind them, there's no CC effect, it's just the damage, so they can even move out of the way while it's happening, and because of that, they end up only getting hit by one of the vortexes, and it just does pathetic damage. So this is a character that I'm not really that high on. I wouldn't recommend building her up. If you haven't already done so, I would kind of put her on the back burner. I wouldn't necessarily recommend building up Black Dwarf all of a sudden, but personally, I do think that he's poised for a major breakthrough, and I think he's going to play a pretty important role in Infinity War as far as attacking Wakanda goes, as far as you know what happens from the Infinity War saga, or at least the Invasion of Earth part. So I hope that Netmarble will translate that into a lot of buffs for Black Dwarf. We don't see as much of Ebony Maw from the trailer, and we know that his role in the movie is more psychological, or kind of like a spy or an infiltrator, but not really on the damage side of things. That being said, he's got an interesting kit. The only problem with Ebony Maw is his fragility. He's very weak, extremely low defenses, low HP, and even as a universal type, he gets slapped around pretty easily. He doesn't have any guaranteed dodge. He doesn't have any way of protecting himself aside from his iframes, but even on Shadow Attack, they're intermittent iframes. There's gaps in between. So I'm also not that high on Ebony Maw for any kind of buffs or for the Infinity War uniform, but he could be strong. He's kind of a dark horse in and of itself, but I just don't see it for him. His tier 2 passive is just not that impressive. His damage basically all comes down to his 5th skill, and while he does have good crowd control abilities, which makes him nice and usable for things like Shadowland and even sometimes Timeline Battle on auto, because you just cannot hit him because he's constantly iframing, it's just not enough. His clones don't have enough stats, and because their defense is so low, because Ebony's defense is so low, they die in a couple of seconds, so there's not enough tanking that they can do. His 2nd skill and his 1st skill as well, he teleports in between the skills, so the animation time is like 5 seconds. It's incredibly long. And with just 1 stun and whatever happens with Shadow Attack, it's like this temporary snare. He's just not in a good position unless he gets a really good rework and he gets additional defenses. He needs immunity, he needs guaranteed dodge, he needs something to kind of improve him. Then we come to Proxima, and Proxima's always been kind of a one-trick pony. Massive spike damage, especially on her 5th skill. this update and whatever buff they have for her is generally going to be positive for her. So she is one of the 3 characters that I have towards the top of the list. If I had to kind of order them, I would probably put Corvis first, Black Dwarf second, Proxima third, and then at the bottom I would put Supergiant and Ebony Maw in whatever order, as far as like a renewed list or a renewed setup or development progression scaling for the Black Order for new and kind of intermediate players. I guess not new players because they don't have any black antimatter, and they definitely want to use it for other characters and epic quests, but for everybody else. But yeah, because she's going to get the all attack buff from the uniform, and plus whatever else she's going to get, she definitely stands to gain quite a bit, and she's one of the better Black Order characters because of the massive damage, because of the crowd control ability. I mean, she's got a stun here, she's got guard break there, she's got shock damage there, she's got additional stuns here, so she can really lock down enemies, and she's always good to have as a striker or as someone that you can buff up and pass damage to because of the massive damage of Midnight Sky. Now, whether they're going to change this skill because of the effect that it has on people's phones and lower end devices, we'll have to wait and see. But especially with her chance to penetrate, she remains kind of outside on the outskirts of the meta. But believe me, if this uniform comes and changes around her skills drastically and makes her a super dangerous enemy, she could very well find herself back in the meta, especially because, you know, she's got a leadership with ignore dodge, so she can counter the speed boys, and the penetration chance, although 30% is low, I could see them giving her a uniform with, you know, adding another 20% or something like that, doubling the chance to 60%, and then suddenly she could be an offensive counter to quickly kill the likes of Nova, or she could kind of be the yin to Blue Marvel's yang as a kind of an offensive versus defensive juggernaut. But we'll have to wait and see. Finally, we come to Corvis, generally regarded as the best Black Order member, and I don't think that this is going to change. So if you haven't upgraded any of them and you are choosing one, I would put Corvis first. He basically just does everything. He's got great damage, a mixture of physical and energy with Pain Wheel and Peekaboo. It's got enduring damage because it leaves these kind of craters in the ground that then explode. It doesn't say here on the skill, which is very bizarre, but it gives him 5 seconds of immunity, so he protects himself. He revives, which is one of the most premium abilities to have in the game. And then he's got summons. And unlike Ebony Maw summons, unlike Supergiant summons, these things take a beating and they just continue. They survive World Boss Ultimate. They survive, you know, Extreme Alliance Battle with the Frost Beast and the Ultron clones and the Meteors. It's just great. He's got decent stats. He's got lots of HP, and so it really helps him to have that for his clones, in addition to all of the clone buffs that they gave him with his tier 2 passive, in addition to the 25% guaranteed dodge. So I only see them making Corvis better for this, and he also has 3 seconds of paralyze on a 3.5 second cooldown with his 3rd skill. He's probably the best member and the most all-around well-rounded character of the Black Order. Having said that, I do want to finish things off by saying you definitely don't want to put any of these characters above the likes of, you know, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, Apocalypse, Cable, and others, you know, Wolverine, Doctor Strange, Jean Grey, of course. It goes without saying, all of the regular characters that you need black antimatter for, I guess you don't need that for Cable, but the ones that you do need it for, don't put any of the Black Order ahead of them. Don't put them ahead of Thanos. Don't put them ahead of I mean, we're at the point where you could put them ahead of Odin and Dormammu. Not all 5 of them, but maybe Corvis. If you anticipated the reworks were going to be really massive, if you really like Corvis or Proxima, there's not that much of a gap nowadays between the impact that Corvis and Dormammu are going to have on your roster. They're going to help you out about the same when it comes to clearing content, especially for something like Shadowland. There's really not that much difference. If anything, Corvis is a bit more flexible because he doesn't die that easily to reflect stages. He can kind of bounce between energy or physical, but overall they're basically the same, and I think Corvis probably is easier to play because of the clones, although they both revive. But we're basically at that point where if they get a sizable enough buff, they could be overtaking Dormammu and Odin on your Black Antimatter and Chaos Nornstone priority list after the characters I've already mentioned from kind of the tier 1 list who appear on the top 30 meta snapshot. So let me know what you guys think of the kind of renewed Infinity War priority for characters and my sudden love for Cull Obsidian or Black Dwarf. Let me know if you're going to upgrade any of these characters now that you've thought about this again, or if you have them already, and what you expect to see from Netmarble, and what you hope to see in terms of game modes. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.